I'm Qiddist Ashé. I am very much in transition today. I just landed in one of my homes on Cowlitz land in Corbett, Oregon. And I was coming from Ethiopia, which is where my mother is from. And I was traveling there with her for the first time together. And so the story that wanted to come through today was just from a week or so ago when I got really sick over there. And I had a fever and a headache and was just like wiped out for a couple days. And I am an herbalist and a traditional midwife, but I'm not really familiar with plants over there. And yet I was sleeping in the house where my mother grew up and where she was cared for by her grandmother, who was also a midwife and an herbalist and a medicine woman. And while I was sick, I kept being called to particular plants in the yard that I didn't know on a sort of book level. I couldn't tell you what the plant was called or its properties, but I knew that was a plant that I was supposed to have. And so I was called to a particular plant and I asked my aunt if she would make a tea out of it. And I knew the word in Amharic, which is a language in Ethiopia, but I didn't know it in English. And my aunt asked me, how did you know this plant is good for fevers? And I said, I had no idea, but it just seemed like the right plant. So I had this tea and I found out later it was in the verbena family. And then the next day I had this terrible headache. And in Ethiopia, everyone drinks rue in their coffee. And rue is also a plant that I work with in this realm of reproductive sovereignty because it's an emmenagogue. It encourages menstruation. And it also can inhibit progesterone, which can support the prevention of implantation, the prevention of a pregnancy from forming. So I know this plant and I have a relationship with it. But for some reason, I had this horrible headache and I was like, can you bring some rue? I'm just going to drink rue in hot water. And my family thought that was so funny. Like, you drink rue in coffee. Like, why are you drinking it in hot water? I'm like, I don't know. And then later I was talking to a friend and she was like, oh yeah, rue is also used for headaches. And it was such a moment of being reminded that whether or not we know our lineages, like whether or not we know who our great grandmother was, or we know where our people came from, even whether or not we think of ourselves as a plant person, that there is both a spiritual and a biological intelligence and knowing that we all carry, that we are designed to be in relationship with plants. And when I think about, dreaming and creating the world that I want to be in, especially in this realm of reproductive health and sovereignty and freedom and care, I think about that remembering being at the core, like remembering that we actually have all these tools and ancestral technologies all around us and in us. And we don't have to have a certificate or a degree or a 7-generation long lineage that we know of in order to access that. Like, it's already ours. And I'm so grateful for everyone who's spoken, and it was so awesome to have Karen like run through the best 10-minute overview of plant plant allies for reproductive sovereignty. I'm like, oh great, she covered that one, perfect. Because there feels like there are these two pieces. There's like the very practical knowledge, right? What are the tools? What are the plants? What are the skills? And one of the things that continues to come up in my own life and my work is beneath the level of the practical tools, which I think many of us, right, are so hungry for. There's this like spirit level, nervous system level of tending that needs to happen, which is like, can we even imagine, right? Like, what would it even feel like in our body for reproductive care to be something that is nourishing and life-giving and ritualized. And so just to give an example, like if I say the words abortion, IUD removal, ovarian cyst healing, birth, my guess is that for most of us, the images and even just hearing that, like the feeling in our bodies, probably for most of us, aren't super loving and generative and collective, right? It's often scary, sterile, medicalized, even dangerous or inaccessible. And so, and sometimes it's actually hard to like imagine what the alternative can feel like. And so a couple quick examples. I had the opportunity maybe a month or so ago to support a woman in my community who was going through an abortion or a pregnancy release. And she had her plants. She was working with cotton root bark. She was working with black cohosh. She was steaming, so doing pelvic steaming every day. And she was surrounded by sisters who were with her, who were feeding her bone broth, who were offering her nettle tea, who were singing. And on the fourth day, her blood came. And we sang and we sat together, and she cried and she was fed. And, you know, afterwards we were talking and she said, I didn't know that something like this could be one of the most healing experiences of my life. And one of the things, in the way that Karen mentioned, the visual of the coat hanger being so upsetting, another thing that I think is well-intentioned, but something that really makes me sad, and something that I see in the media and the public narrative around abortion and pregnancy release right now, is this idea of self-managed abortion, and this idea of like, we just pop pills and and go to work the next day. And while I think it's well-intentioned, this truth that we self-govern life and death in our wombs inherently, right, in our bodies. And that is of immense spiritual responsibility. And it's not something that we're designed to do in isolation, to do alone, to do behind closed doors and then live a functional, you know, life, go back to work. But when we are in ritual and in community around it, anything can be medicine. Like, I really believe, and I have seen that anything can be medicine. I have watched fibroids dissolve under the hands of loving touch and uterine massage. I have seen that even death, right, when midwifed and held, can be a source of just immense gratitude and love and healing. And even something like removing an IUD, right? I was with a sister recently who I had supported over the phone, and she was like, I had my 3 friends come over and we sat in circle together and steamed and sang, and I took my own IUD out and they fed me and gave me tea and made sure I was okay. And this is reproductive care. And I offer that to say that my invitation would be like really to dream and to feel into your body, like what is the juiciest, most nourishing, loving experience that we can co-create for each other, and hold that as the standard, actually. Because we have been so taught and conditioned to accept crumbs, and I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not willing to accept those crumbs. And I think more of us are also done with that. And something I was thinking about when we were talking about what can our care options be when the state restricts our choices. It feels like these Octavia Butler times, as Karen said, and I so agree, offers this actually gorgeous opportunity to create the worlds in which we want to live in. And that even though, like, on the surface, our choices are restricted, it compels us to be like, well, then what are the actual liberating choices that we want to create? And in my world, that looks like undisturbed birth. That looks like sitting in circle and tending to our wombs and steaming together. It looks like knowing how to hold this portal of life and death, and midwife that, and walk with plants and walk with each other. And for anyone who's like feeling that yearning and feels like they don't know what to do, just be with each other, like gather, because we hold so much medicine that we don't even know yet. And there's such power in just simply being together as we walk through this, and we build the skills and the tools along the way. And I know that everyone who's spoken is going to share some resources and ways to connect at the end of this. So I'll leave that for then. But yeah, I think that feels complete. I'm really holding that feeling in my body that I'm so honored and privileged to get to experience on a daily basis, that reproductive care and community can be joyful and loving and nourishing and life-giving and sacred. And that's my prayer, that spreads.